Hey, what's up? It's Anthony Marley Love. Welcome to the first episode of our series, Traveling While Black Across America, Volume 1.
Yes, and as a brief reminder, our show is based on our experiences traveling, and we base those experiences off of how good of a drive it was, how much fun we had, and most importantly, how comfortable do we feel as Black people visiting for the first time.
So, we will be hitting up 4 cities across Middle America for this series. The first city, we are starting in our home state of Missouri, in the beautiful city of Kansas City.
Yes, and we want to thank our sponsors, Real Solutions RS and Sync Seattle. You'll learn more about them within the episode. And as always, take a look at this episode and let us know what you think. A few years back, we started our show to help others interested in exploring the Pacific Northwest.
Inspired by the spirit of the Negro Motorist Green Book, we wanted to be a valuable resource to Black and BIPOC travelers, while also connecting them to some of the most amazing places in this part of the country.
We thought, what if we took our show to some other cities across the United States? What new things could we learn? What new stories could we hear?
So we decided to find out and picked 4 cities:
Kansas City, Missouri,
Denver, Colorado,
Cheyenne, Wyoming,
Billings, Montana, and loaded up in the car to drop in to experience each for a couple of days.
And of course, rate our experience for the drive, the amount of fun, and most importantly, how comfortable we felt visiting as a Black traveler.
I'm Anthony Love.
I'm Marley Love.
Come along with us on Traveling While Black Across America,
Volume 1. For the first stop in our TWB Across America series, we chose a city located within our birth state of Missouri, the Midwestern city sitting on the banks of the Missouri River, Kansas City.
To most people, the city may not come to mind in being thought of in regards to being a large city, even though it is in fact the 36th largest in the country. But to most people, the city is well known for a few other things.
Things that locals won't hesitate to let you know about, like...
All over the world, they often refer to Kansas City as barbecue.
You also have barbecue.
Is that in what you kept up and ground?
Or...
refer to Kansas City as jazz.
But you have the jazz history here, which is rich.
What's jazz history?
The evolution of jazz, Kansas City is right at the epicenter of that.
And of course...
refer to Kansas City as in baseball.
In Kansas City, you have Negro League baseball.
Kansas City is the birthplace of the Negro Leagues.
Yes, they will let you know.
I even didn't mention the jazz and barbecue.
But for us, having grown up on the other side of the state, whose opinion on the city normally would be, I can't lie, us on the St. Louis side of the state, we low-key hated on the city. But during this experience, on this particular visit, we were blown away by what we were able to learn about the city and its enormous contributions, not only to Black culture, but American culture.
On our visit to Kansas City, not only did we get to learn the rich history, but we got to hear it directly from some pretty extraordinary Kansas City locals, each somewhat an expert of the Kansas City culture.
Like Bob Kendrick, president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, George W. Gates II, COO of the famous Gates Barbecue, Jermaine Reed, former Kansas City councilman who was also the youngest ever elected to represent the city within the role, and Darren Story, Director of Development at the American Jazz Museum.
During Level of Fun, you will also hear from a local Kansas City Black business owner, Kimmett Coleman, co-founder of Vine Street Brewing, Missouri's first Black-owned brewery that's carving out an exclusive space within the city's craft beer industry.
Yes, this wasn't our first experience visiting Kansas City, but this was definitely our most eye-opening. And we are sure that this episode will be just as eye-opening for you if you're familiar with the city or not. The story of Kansas City's contributions to American culture begins and still lives within the city's 18th and Vine district,
which began like most historic Black neighborhoods during the earlier years of the city's development, the only area where Black families were allowed to live.
Unfortunately, back in those days, early 1900s, 1920s, 1930s, African Americans were only confined to a certain few blocks there in the 18th and Vine area. But that's where a lot of Black businesses were housed. The barbershop, the grocery stores, the hotels, all their shops was all in that area.
Among the collection of businesses sprouting up within the 18th and Vine district were 3 Black-owned barbecue joints.
You have over 128 barbecue restaurants in Kansas City. In 1946, we had 3 black barbecue restaurants. 2024, you still have 3. Not the same 3.
The barbecue that came from these particular establishments would not only define KC's style, but also create mainstream viability in what was once considered a lower class pastime.
Barbecue wasn't seen as something that people really thought was a viable or respectable career. But because it originated there, and now nearly 75 years later, when you talk about barbecue or so, it's not just because it's coming out of a brown bag, it's a sit-down fancy restaurant.
The delicious barbecue wasn't the only thing attracting people to the district. Because of the overlooking of enforcing a particular federal law, the city became a really hot attraction, especially for a particular type of crowd.
There were over 300 jazz clubs in this town. Many people migrated to Kansas City that were playing blues and jazz in the South. And one of the things that happened was in Kansas City during those times, prohibition really wasn't a thing because you could come here and drink. And so jazz began to flourish because there was more places for people to play. Heard it's been said that jazz was born in New Orleans, but it grew up in Kansas City. Charlie Parker was one of the essential people that really began the evolution of jazz from a place where jazz used to dance to it, like Ellington and Louis Armstrong. Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, those guys were the cats that really kind of moved it to the next level, and that happened right here in Kansas City.
This had an amazing effect on the neighborhood, more ways than just a financial influx.
We're trying to put a statue that is still 86th Street and symbolizes that area. You know, with the suits and the chain and the big hat, because that was what we hear, but we were hearing color.
The national and cultural contributions from 18th and Vine District didn't stop at jazz and barbecue. Yes, it extended into the sports world and even beyond that.
But when we look at Kansas City, it's the birthplace of the Negro Leagues. The leagues were formed here in Kansas City at a meeting held at the old Paseo YMCA. The Negro Leagues were where Jackie Robinson got his start. Jackie Robinson's breaking of the color barrier would not only change the game, it changed his country. It was in essence the start of the civil rights movement in this country.
Yes, we were blown away. Somehow, it wasn't until now that we grasped the full impact of Kansas City's Black culture specific to the 18th and Vine District. What was great was that the main staples and what went into defining that history can still be experienced in the city today and within the same neighborhood.
So for the first city we stopped in as a part of our Traveling While Black Across America series, knowing what we know now, we felt lucky to have another opportunity to experience the city of Kansas City, this time the right way. Drive grade. Before we get into it, let us explain our new expanded drive grade rating scale.
We are expanding the rating scales for all of our categories, going from a 5-point scale to a 10-point scale. This way we can add more context to why we are rating experiences the way we are.
For a drive grade, that means we are breaking it down like this. The quality of the views along the route, the access to gas stations and restaurants along the route, the easiness of the route, or in other words, the route doesn't require a lot of highway switching, or even worse, hits a lot of traffic. Also, the quality of roadside attractions along the route. Finally, you already know, the quality of the parking options. Hopefully there are a lot of options, and even better, there are free options.
For this drive that will be the start of our cross-country journey, originally it was going to take us an easy straight shot down Highway I-70.
Starting in my hometown of Wentzville, Missouri, the ride normally takes around 3 hours. But for this trip, we wanted to make sure that we really take advantage of what these parts of the country have to offer as we roll through.
So if we encounter a historic national landmark, local landmark, or just an interesting tourist trap within a realistic distance off of the planned route, we plan on stopping by and checking it out.
This being a ride that both Mars and I have taken many times during our lifetime, there were also a lot of places that we have never pulled off at, like America's National Churchill Museum in Fulton, Missouri.
The museum is located on the campus of Westminster College and commemorates the spot where in 1946, Winston Churchill delivered one of the most famous speeches. We had no idea.
Unfortunately, we didn't have time to go in. Plus, it was closed. And of course, we had to keep moving towards Kansas City. But since the route that put us back on 70 also took us through the state capital of Missouri, we decided we might as well stop there.
Yes, we pulled off in Jefferson City, Missouri, took a couple of pictures, and then hopped back into the car and continued down the road. For the rest of the journey to Kansas City, we didn't stop at any other roadside attractions.
But we did have to make one more gas station stop, in which we pulled off in a small town called Nelson, Missouri. Our experience here was so-so, because while we did see quite a few other black folk,
the bathrooms were gross. Finally, after what timed out to be 5 hours total on the road, we pulled into our first hotel of our cross-country journey, 21C Museum Hotel in Kansas City.
Yes, 5 hours. 2 hours longer than what the route from Wentzville, Missouri to Kansas City, Missouri should normally take. But again, that was okay, because we were able to see something that we have never took time to see before, and also seen something that we never thought we would be able to see again.
For this cross-country journey, we were just excited about what hidden gems we would be able to discover along the way, as we were just about experiencing the destination themselves.
So how did the roadside experiences through our former home state contribute to the drive grade rating overall? Well, let's talk about the rating, and let's start with the views. There weren't very many attractive ones along the route that we took.
Yep, just gas stations and billboards, so no points there. But the abundance of gas stations and even fast food options along the route does help this drive score high in regard to roadside amenities.
For the easiness of the drive, you don't get any easier than a straight drive down I-70. And even with our detours, it was pretty simple getting back on the original route. So this drive does score very high there.
As far as roadside attractions, while it was nice that we got to see America's National Churchill Museum that we've never seen before, still it didn't really ring the bell for sounding like extreme fun.
We must say that Missouri does offer a lot of other gems, if you venture off of 70. But for our experience, there just wasn't enough to pull us off. So we'll knock it down to half a point for this aspect.
Finally, an aspect important to at least one of us, parking. We actually rate the city high in this regard.
Let me just say that it was very refreshing to be in a city with an abundance of parking options. And believe it or not, I never paid for parking once. Wow.
So based on that breakdown, we figured that for our drive to Kansas City and the first drive in our Cross America series, we give a 7 out of 10 for drive grade.
7 out of 10, not too bad. But still, after experiencing a pleasant drive into the city, our previous perception kept us questioning if our experience in the city would still rate high in terms of fun. Level of fun. Again, since we are expanding the rating scales for all of our categories, going from a 5-point scale to a 10-point scale, let us explain our level of fun.
For a 10-point level of fun rating, we will be considering the amount and quality of activities offered within the vicinity of the location, the variety of activities that apply to the different visitor demographics. And what we mean by this is, are the activities better suited for couples, singles, or families? Are they more suited for younger or older folks? And we are also taking into account the quality of restaurant options, the affordability of the area. Finally, are there any special events happening during our visit?
So, how was our experience this trip? As we stated several times already, we've been to Kansas City a bunch of times throughout our life, but this time, really grasping the Black history is probably why we spent a lot of time on 18th and Vine experiencing that history.
No surprise, we dropped into the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, the popular museum dedicated to preserving and celebrating the history of African American baseball.
Kansas City is the proper place and the rightful place for a museum dedicated to this subject matter to be, because it is literally in the same neighborhood that the leagues were formed. The Negro Leagues Baseball Museum opened in a little tiny one-room office here at historic 18th and Vine across the street from where we currently operate now inside the historic Lincoln Building. The office couldn't have been very much larger than the immediate space that we're standing in. It had a conference room table, and guys like my dear friend, the late great Buck O'Neill, and other local Negro Leaguers literally took turns paying the monthly rent to keep that little office open, and with it, our hopes and dreams of one day building a facility that would pay rightful tribute to not just one of the greatest chapters in baseball history, but what now thousands of people each and every year discover one of the greatest chapters in American history.
Experiencing this museum was amazing. Walking through the exhibits, you could almost feel the spirit of the old players, owners, umps, and others who are a part of the Negro League's rich history.
We definitely recommend everyone visiting this museum at least once in their lifetime, especially in the near future because the museum has some big plans in the works.
So last May, we announced plans to build a brand new standalone Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, an exciting 30,000+ square foot facility that will be built adjacent to the former Paseo YMCA, soon to become the Buck O'Neill Education and Research Center, and creating what I call the nation's first Negro Leagues campus as the gateway into historic 18th and Vine, and creating an international headquarters for both Black baseball and social history. So that's a long way from that little one-room office.
We will definitely be back for that. Our experience with dope museums didn't stop with the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. Just across the way was another museum commemorating another historic contribution from the city, the American Jazz Museum.
The American Jazz Museum is another amazing museum that allows visitors to experience jazz through a variety of interactive exhibits, films, and artifacts, some of which we couldn't believe.
Charlie Parker, this is his saxophone behind me.
Yes, this is another museum that we absolutely recommend folks experiencing at least once in their lifetime. You will definitely learn something new about America's only indigenous art form. I mean, even the people running the museum have some legendary musical moments under their belt, huh?
The museum experience was great, but we need to experience something just as fun, but a little less educational.
And what better way to achieve that goal than to drink some beer?
For us, beer is normally not our first option, but when we heard that one of the most popular brewery and tap rooms within the city was Black-owned, we knew we had to check it out.
Vine Street Brewery, Missouri's first Black-owned brewery. Even though it was closed on the day of our visit, we still had the opportunity to meet with co-founder Commit Coleman, who gave us a tour and explained to us the inspiration and story behind the barely year-old brew brand.
Tail end of 2021, we first announced that we were opening this brewery. It had a pretty huge impact here in Kansas City, at least. Kansas City had never had a Black-owned brewery before, and I don't think people really even thought about that as a concept. I asked a guy that I had met if he wanted to start this brewery with me. His name was Woody Bonds, and Woody was someone that was a home brewer, an award-winning home brewer. He said, I'll do it if we bring along this other guy named Elliot. So Elliot is our head brewer. Elliot was also a home brewer. Along that journey, we actually brought along another fourth teammate. Her name was Annie McGinnis. Annie McGinnis is really the lifeblood of our taproom operations here. Without her, none of this is possible. We'd be making good beer, but we probably wouldn't be selling it very well. The location question came into place, and so Kansas City has lots of great locations, but there's only one location that really resonates with us as Black creatives and Black innovators and community catalysts, and that's 18th and Vine. When we opened June 30th of 2023, we were able to really get a bunch of the community out. It was immediately the most diverse tap room in Kansas City, in the country, to be honest with you. You never see, Black people just completely mixed with white people, Hispanic people, like all different walks of life, the whole spectrum, straight, queer, all of that. So we really appreciated that.
And of course, we had to have some of the beer.
Listen, this beer was delicious. Look, I am far from a beer drinker, but I can see myself drinking beer from Vine Street Brewery, which makes sense because according to Kimmett, Vine Street thrives to make a beer for everyone. So be sure to follow Vine Street Brewery's social media and check their website for hours and information and any special events happening at their tap room.
Yes, great beer and amazing museums. Even our stay at 21C Museum Hotel Kansas City was awesome. Comfortable rooms, and they even had art exhibits within the lobby.
Yes, all of that definitely made our experience in the city seem a lot of fun, but how does Kansas City stack up to our rating scale?
First, looking at activities. We have to say that Kansas City offers an abundance of options for fun things to do outside of what we did for this episode. From a happening nightlife scene within the Power and Lights district to the many professional sports teams that claim the city as home. So it scores pretty high in that regard.
What also stands out about the activities the city offers is that they offer something for everybody, whether you're young, old, or in between. In this city, you can find something for anybody, so demographic applicability also scores high.
In regards to affordability, the Midwest prices around the city were a lovely and a missed experience for us. So, we can say that Kansas City definitely knocks it out the park for affordability. And this has to be great news for families considering a trip to the city.
In regards to quality of restaurants, we definitely enjoyed some delicious food at some really great ones. From a full course meal at the Black-owned Misop Ethiopian and Caribbean restaurant to fuel for the morning at the Black-owned Ruby Jean's Juicery.
Yes, those were great options, but not surprisingly, what really knocks the score out of the park for this aspect was the barbecue. Especially being that we ate at one of the OG spots that makes Kansas City.
Barbecue kept up the ground.
We even got the chance to ask Mr. Gates what makes Kansas City barbecue so special. Look, he would know because it was his grandfather who opened up the very first location.
What makes Kansas City barbecue so magical? The person who's barbecue. Barbecue is a personality. And so that's what brings it out. Your personality and my personality are different. You barbecue the same recipe, it will come out different. That's why Kansas City is so great at barbecue, because Kansas City's full of personality, Black personality.
Looking at the tally of all those perfect scores, there is no way around it. Kansas City is a great option for fun. So that's why we can give it a 10 out of 10 for level of fun.
If you would have asked us prior to embarking on this journey, we probably wouldn't have guessed that we would be giving Kansas City a perfect score on level of fun.
Up until this point, Kansas City had been a pleasant surprise all around. But the final important question was, would the pleasantries continue when considering the city's comfort level for Black travelers?
Comfortability for Black people. So here we go. For perhaps one of the most important categories, this is how we are measuring our comfortability for Black people rating.
For one, we will be considering the amount of Black people we saw during our visit. Also, we will be considering the most recent Black population numbers.
Other points of consideration are how prevalent is the Black history of the area, also the visibility of signs that indicate inclusion.
Finally, we will be basing it on how comfortable or uncomfortable we feel personally walking around the city and into different establishments. So let's start with the amount of Black people we saw during our visit. We actually saw a lot.
And this shouldn't be a surprise because according to 2021 numbers, Black or African American non-Hispanics make up the largest minority demographic within the city. So we can give high ratings for both those two aspects.
As for prevalence of Black history, this too should not be a surprise. The history can be experienced up close throughout the whole 18th and Vine District.
The 18th and Vine District not only included the museums that we showcased in this episode, but it also includes others dedicated to Black history, such as the Black Archives of Mid-America. Just by this area alone, the city knocks this aspect out of the park.
So when you look at that depth of heritage and culture, and then you look at this neighborhood alone with a Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, an American Jazz Museum, you'll be hard pressed to find an area that has that depth of culture and heritage in one centralized location anywhere in the country.
While the Black history is very prevalent, what was not were signs of inclusion. We didn't notice a whole lot of signs that would promote inclusion, so we will take a point off in that regard. But how do we feel personally during our visit?
We cannot 100% say if it was because we were born and raised in Missouri or because we spend the majority of our time within the city with locals who are the embodiment of Black excellence within the city. But the fact of the matter is that throughout our whole time, we felt comfortable.
Yes, people were friendly pretty much everywhere we went. Even 21C Museum Hotel featured a Black artist and welcomed us with a diverse, friendly staff. Our personal feelings of comfort along with the other aspects sealed the deal. Kansas City exceeded our expectations in yet another category.
So officially for us, for the city of Kansas City, within our home state of Missouri, we can give a 9 out of 10 for comfortability for Black people. There you have it. Coming in at a 7 for the drive grade, a perfect score of 10 for level of fun, and a 9 for comfort level for Black people, Kansas City turned out to be a great option for anyone looking for a great destination.
This eye-opening trip to Kansas City will definitely not be our last, especially anytime soon. We were planning to return, but this time we're bringing along some family to experience the history with them.
And we absolutely recommend you doing the same. Kansas City was the perfect start to our Cross America journey. And while we would have loved to stay a little bit longer, we had to move on.
So after checking out of our most comfortable accommodations at 21C Museum Hotel, we loaded into the car to continue down I-70 to our next destination, the Mile High city of Denver, Colorado.
For the second stop in our TWB Across America series, we are continuing west on Interstate 70 and dropping into the city of Denver, Colorado.
Denver is the biggest city in the state of Colorado, which is the first state we will visit on this journey that is a part of what is known as the Rocky Mountain States, a collection of states that the iconic Rocky Mountains range run through.
But Colorado is the state that most of the mountain occupies. This makes sense because the altitude is something that you could feel just driving within the car. That is why the city of Denver is known as the Mile High City.
A great fact about the city that pertains to this episode is that we did not need to pull off to see the capital of Colorado, because Denver is in fact the capital of the state. But beyond being the state capital, the city is notable for quite a few other things.
Yep, like its forever evolving craft beer scene, or its proximity to great hiking options. But for us, what stood out most on this stop, once again, was the abundance of Black history within the city. And once again, history we previously had no idea about.
Yes, I must admit, just like with Kansas City, I have had plenty of opportunity to learn the Black history of Denver before this trip. See, my family lives in the Denver area, so I've been visiting since I was a little girl.
But as they say, better late than never. And even though it's late, there's no better time to discover the rich history of the Mile High City than on this road trip for this episode.
Also for this episode, we were able to get insight on this vibrant history from some individuals who live there. And just like last episode, you also hear from those individuals.
Yes, individuals local to the Denver area, all from a variety of walks of life. From a popular content creator with the mission of inclusion.
Hello, I'm Parker McMullen Bushman, aka Queen Work. I am also the founder of Eco Inclusive and the co-founder of the Inclusive Guide.
To a historian dedicated to preserving the district's rich cultural history.
My name is Terry Gentry. I am an engagement manager for Black communities here at History Colorado. I'm also a volunteer docent and on the board of directors for the Black American West Museum and Heritage Center in Denver.
We even got to talk to a city firefighter currently working in one of the historic Black firehouses.
My name is Lieutenant Gabe Mamgonian with the Denver Fire Department.
And as you will see during our Level of Fun segment, we got to talk with some really dope individuals passionate about a really amazing mission that is rooted within the state's Black history.
I'm Maddie Shaheen, and I'm the Environmental STEM Program Manager for Lincoln Hills Care.
I am PJ Galloway, and I am the Environmental Sustainability Specialist for Lincoln Hills Care.
The experience of Denver for this episode had a lot of similarities with our trip to Kansas City for the last episode, including the unfamiliar Black history, meeting up with extraordinary local individuals, and of course our excitement to perhaps show you, the viewer, a different perspective of the Mile High City.
Throughout this series, you will see how all of the Rocky Mountain state cities were influenced by the railroad industry, and in some cases, the main reason they came to be.
No surprise that the industry had a major influence on one of the oldest districts in the city, even designating the name of the district.
To go back historically, Denver was founded at the confluence of Cherry Creek and Platte River in 1858 and grew in a northeasterly direction. Later on, someone started other parts of the city like Capitol Hill on the northeast west-south grid. And as Capitol Hill grew north and the Five Points neighborhood continued to grow northeast, you get these weird corners. Some spaces you'll count 5 corners. And in the 1890s, a trolley rolled down Welton Street and stopped at that corner. Instead of calling the names of all the streets on their marquee, they called it Five Points, and the name stuck. Now it's called the Five Points Historic Cultural District. It's been registered as a cultural district.
The industry was even one of the 2 main influences on the 5 Points in becoming the historic Black district in Denver.
It's always been a multi-ethnic neighborhood, and we had a lot of Black families move into that area, especially with the influx of folks coming to work on the railroads.
The other major influence on the 5 Points becoming the historic black district in the city was the usual suspect behind historic black neighborhoods across America, redlining.
But also, as usual to the story of historical black neighborhoods in America, the black residents built a thriving community that became a national cultural hotspot.
In the midst of all of that, we had quite a few black business owners up and down Welton Street. A range of different businesses from clothing and groceries and dry cleaners and anything imaginable that you needed was along that street.
Yes, black faces made up all aspects of the neighborhood, including the fire department that was located within the neighborhood.
Right behind me is historic Denver Station number 3. It's in predominantly black neighborhood known as 5 Points in the Denver area. It is known as the Eye of the Storm. Eye of the Storm comes from this neighborhood. It's always being a safe haven and a place to go for the neighbors and the community to come together and feel safe, a part of the community, and a place that they'd be able to go to for whatever they need. It's become a huge part of this community, this neighborhood, and as well as how long this station's been here. It's one of the oldest fire stations in Denver. The original Station 3 is just across the street, but this is one of the longest running fire stations in the city of Denver, and it means a lot to the neighborhood.
While the local black residents ran the district's infrastructure, the district also attracted outside black visitors thanks to a same American art form that attracted people to Kansas City's 18th and Vine, jazz.
Thanks to the efforts of a local musician, a lot of popular jazz musicians and other celebrities were driven to the neighborhood, helping it become known as Harlem of the West.
George Morrison, who was a classically trained concert violinist, he wasn't allowed to play in the symphony orchestras. So he started his own band and they traveled around the United States performing. And he knew all of these musicians like Duke Ellington, Lionel Hampton, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald. And they started having guests come in, some of the nightclubs. And it got to the place where we were having so many guests come in, we were called Harlem of the West. This was just a place to come in.
Unfortunately, as the case with almost all historic black neighborhoods across America, the good times eventually slowed down and opportunity began to dry up within the 5 Points.
Ironically, in some ways, the same factors that contributed to the neighborhood becoming what it was in its prime also contributed to its decline. Redlining, black mobility, and a railroad. Or at least a newer version of one.
Redlining continued to limit resources and investments into the community, and the advancement in salaries allowed more and more black residents to move to more desired places and areas outside the district.
The final straw would be the construction of the light rail, which disrupted a lot of the remaining businesses while it was being built. All of this resulted to the city council declaring the neighborhood to be blighted in 2012.
While there is still an ongoing struggle with gentrification and in some cases redlining, there are current vibrant black businesses and motivated individuals determined on preserving this neighborhood's character and heritage.
It's important to me that we preserve this history because there's so much information about what was experienced in that neighborhood. Music and entertainment and great restaurants and small business owners, community gatherings. Just a lot of things happening. We don't want to lose that history.
The neighborhood also hosts two of the biggest annual events within the city, the Juneteenth Music Festival and the 5 Points Jazz Festival. But more on those two events during Level of Fun.
Once again on our journey, we encountered a rich, impactful story of our history that we previously were not aware of.
But lucky for us, once again on our journey, we were able to experience that history up close, as well as the people carrying it on today, both via artifacts from the past and through the living establishments paving the way into the future.
And once again, we were excited to drop in and find out if experiencing the rich black history will be enough for us to rank the Mile High city of Denver, Colorado, high in terms of fun and most importantly, comfort.
Drive grade.
The drive from Kansas City, Missouri to the second leg of our cross-country series Volume 1, Denver, Colorado, was to be our longest drive of the trip, and that wasn't even considering our stops at roadside attractions.
The drive will come out to be on average around 9 hours, but the route on paper would again be a simple one, since we again were planning to take Interstate 70 the whole way straight there. But of course, that wasn't to be, because the attractions would veer us off onto a whole new route.
As I mentioned before, I have taken the drive from Missouri to Denver, Colorado many times since I was a little girl, and to be honest, it wasn't among my list of favorites, so my expectations were really low.
And since we've been together for more than 2 decades, I also have had plenty of opportunities to experience the drive. And I too can say it definitely wasn't one of my favorites. The major problem for us was the large, flat, boring state of Kansas.
Yes, I hated the Kansas part of this drive. Not only was the scenery of Kansas flat and boring, but majority of the drive is through this state. We hated it until we took this trip.
See, because of this trip and our choice in deciding and really taking advantage of choosing to drive the journey, we were able to experience the drive this time in a whole different light.
Ironically, it would be this drive from Kansas City to Denver that would be one of our favorites throughout the entire road trip, mainly because of the many attractions that we discovered in, believe it or not, the state of Kansas.
By the hour down Interstate 70, we pulled off in the state capital of Topeka, Kansas. Not only did we stop by the Capitol building so we could snap a couple pictures, but also to visit the Brown v. Board of Education National Historical Park. This National Historical Park features a museum that is housed in what was formerly Monroe Elementary, which was the school at the center of the landmark decision on Brown v. Board of Education.
The museum dedicated to telling the story around the decision that would end segregation within American schools. Of course, the park, which is also a part of the National Civil Rights Trail, is open to the public and also offers tours. Check the National Parks website at nps.gov for more information.
While we did see what appeared to be a local school field trip entering the museum, we unfortunately couldn't go inside to check it out. Well, because we had to continue on our journey. Plus, there was a lot more things to see along the way.
The history was great, but for our next attraction, I wanted to have a little fun. So we headed a little over 45 minutes off the original path to the small town of Wamego, Kansas, to see the Oz Museum, only because I was and will always be a huge fan of the movie.
Not really sure what they offer, but we definitely did not go in. No shade to the Oz Museum, but I was hyped to get to another historic attraction. See, just another 40 or so minutes down the road, we pulled into Junction City to stop by the Buffalo Soldier Memorial, a statue dedicated as a tribute to the Black Troop of the 9th and 10th Cavalry Regiments.
The monument is located in Pawnee Park, ironically near the location of the segregated family housing assigned to the families of the Black soldiers. While it wasn't as fun as the Oz stop, I still enjoyed this historic one. But the stop that I enjoyed the most was the next one. And it was even another historic stop, Nicodemus, Kansas, a National Historic Site dedicated to the oldest and only remaining Black settlement west of the Mississippi River.
The story of Nicodemus was yet another amazing story of Black history that we previously had never heard of prior to this trip. Nicodemus came about when former enslaved African Americans left the reconstruction of the post-Civil War South to experience the freedom promised within Kansas. They established the self-sustaining town that operated until the economic collapse that brought about the Great Depression.
The park is definitely worth a visit if you happen to be passing through. 5 of the original historic buildings still stand, and there are plaques scattered throughout the park telling the interesting history of the town. Once again, check out the National Parks website at nps.gov for more information.
Yeah, we really enjoyed the park and somewhat took our time, but not too much time because we still had 7 hours left before reaching Denver.
Yes, 7 hours seemed like a lot, especially since we had already been driving with what felt like at least that long. But having experienced the stops we experienced along the way, it made the extra long ride seem like it was worth it.
Plus, we officially made it to the Mile High City. So did the abundance of amazing roadside attractions still equate to a high overall drive grade rating for this trip? Let's see.
Starting with views, the scenery of the state is still flat and pretty boring, so no points there. But the score bounces back with a high score in regards to roadside amenities, with the abundance of gas stations and quick stop restaurants.
I know the straight shot down Interstate 70 is what gives this drive a high score in regard to route difficulty, and of course the score couldn't be more perfect for us when considering the roadside attractions.
Unfortunately for one of us, it was a parking situation around the city of Denver that caused the score to take a hit. So after all of that, for our second drive in our Cross Country America series, just like our first drive grade, we give a 7 out of 10 for drive grade.
Not too bad. And to be honest, if I wasn't such a stickler for the parking, the drive could have easily been a 10 on the roadside attractions we experienced alone. But beautiful people, I got to keep it real.
Still, the city of Denver had 2 more opportunities to score even higher in other categories, and the level of fun was one that we were actually excited to experience going in. Level of fun.
Like all of our visits, we wanted to experience activities within Denver that the city is known for, and of course, the local Black history recently discovered by us.
We started with the Black history and did a mini walking tour of the 5 Points Historical Cultural District, exploring the sites that included some of the original buildings popular during the district's heyday. We were even given a tour of the historic Fire Station number 3.
Throughout the neighborhood, you will find plaques that detail the story history of the district. We do want to come back and do a deeper dive of the neighborhood and cover the dope stores we didn't have time to mention this time around.
After the history, we were ready to loosen up, which meant it was a perfect time to experience the craft beer scene within the city, once dubbed the craft beer capital of the nation.
Similar to our Kansas City experience, we were able to find a Black-owned brewery and tap room. And also like our KC experience, we were served some delicious beer that impressed us non-beer drinkers.
Novel Strand Brewing Company is a Black and woman-owned brewery and tap room. Their tap room, located at 305 West 1st Avenue in Denver, offers great vibes and even a food truck outside. And of course, like Aunt said, a wide selection of delicious beers that were even appealing to us.
We had a great time in Novel Strand, and it appeared that everyone else did as well. And we mean everyone. Besides the history and craft beer, the final big thing we had to experience was the outdoors. Being in Colorado, a state that is possibly most noted for its unlimited access to amazing outdoor experiences, it is no surprise that Denver is in close proximity to some great hikes and camping grounds.
This is why it should be no surprise that there are some really amazing local Black creators making great content around enjoying the outdoors and encouraging more participation within the Black community. We got to meet up with one of those creators and learn more about their mission to expand inclusion into the outdoors and beyond.
I co-founded Inclusive Guide along with my partner and co-founder Crystal Egley in 2018. The Inclusive Guide is kind of like Yelp, but for inclusion. And people rate places and spaces based on how they felt they were treated in relation to their identity. And then we look for trends on the back end.
We definitely recommend exploring the Inclusive Guide. You can find out more at inclusiveguide.com.
The importance of communicating safe and inclusive friendly travel is easily understood when one considers an ugly part of the history of Denver and the state of Colorado overall.
Denver was an interesting place back then. All of the things that we were able to do, but the state of Colorado had membership that exceeded 50,000 of the Ku Klux Klan here.
That's why for Black people within the state, historically, safe and easy access to the outdoors was nearly impossible to come by, but not impossible, thanks to a popular Black resort.
In 1922, E.C. Regner and Roger Ewald created Lincoln Hills Resort, which was for the longest time the only resort for African Americans west of the Mississippi River. Middle-class Black families were able to escape the grips of segregation that outside of the resort prevented them from experiencing the joys of nature.
Beyond the Black middle class, the resort also served as the location of a YMCA girls' camp that served African American women and girls prohibited from participating in other camps around the country. Today, that spirit of giving back and charity continues at Lincoln Hills.
In 2007, a Black philanthropist who actually grew up in the 5 Points neighborhood purchased a property and founded Lincoln Hills Cares, a nonprofit organization that operates programs at the resort geared to expand access to the outdoors to African American and other BIPOC communities.
For our outdoor experience this trip, we had the extraordinary privilege to tour the Lincoln Hills property and learn more about the organization's mission from two individuals instrumental in its operation.
Hi, we're Lincoln Hills Cares. We're at the historic Lincoln Hills at the beautiful Lake Pactolus. We are an environmental nonprofit educating youth in the environment, conservation, sustainability, and providing access to the outdoors. The historic Lincoln Hills was established in the 1920s. This was a safe space for all people to be able to access the outdoors during times of segregation. Today, we educate youth about the cultural history of African Americans in the West and also in environmental education and conserving our planet and our resources.
One of the most important things that has influenced me working at Lincoln Hills is a very special quote by our benefactor, and that is, if you can learn to create a universe out of nothing, your mentality can move from one of scarcity to that of abundance. So we hope that we can transfer that to anybody that comes up here.
Lincoln Hills is a nonprofit, so a lot of what they do is dependent on donations. If you're interested in finding out how you can contribute to their mission, be sure to check out their website at lincolnhillscares.org.
The visit to Lincoln Hills cemented us feeling like we had a great time and a lot of fun overall. But how does our feeling stand up to our level of fun rating scale?
First, considering activities. Denver has an abundance of things to do, and what we did this episode does not come close to scratching the surface. Just looking at sports alone, the city is home to 5 major professional sports teams, so there's definitely a high score there.
We can say that within the abundance of options, the city can provide activities for visitors of all ages and interests, so we can give another high score here for demographic applicability. However, when it comes to affordability, the city does run on the more expensive side.
Yes, the price increase reminded us that we weren't in the Midwest anymore, but because it's still cheaper than what we're used to in Seattle, we'll only take away a point. The score does bounce back in a major way when measuring the quality of restaurants. The food throughout the city was great everywhere we went.
One of our favorite restaurant experiences in Denver was at Le French, considered to be one of the best restaurants within the city, and it's also Black owned. Finally, looking at special events, no surprise with the many sports teams, the city is always hosting some type of national event. But for us, the 2 events that take place within the 5 Points neighborhood were the most intriguing.
We will definitely need to try and make it back for the Juneteenth Music Festival, Denver's longest running Juneteenth celebration that is a 2-day festival, and the 5 Points Jazz Festival, which is a free all-day event celebrating the jazz culture of the neighborhood.
And tallying up the points overall, we can see that our feeling was absolutely verified by the score, because we can give Denver a 9 out of 10 for level of fun.
Wow, nearly a perfect score, and it makes sense because there are plenty of reasons why we want to come back. But before we jump the gun in booking our return trip, we had to first break down our experience of the city in terms of the level of comfort.
Comfortability for Black people.
But let's start with the amount of other Black people we saw during our visit. Again, like during our visit to Kansas City, we actually saw a lot.
Well, at least more than we expected. Part of the reason our expectation was low was because the population of Black or African American non-Hispanics in Denver is only 8%. So we will knock a point for the population numbers.
In regards for prevalence of Black history, we are obviously going to give a high score here due to us having experienced the 5 Points neighborhood. And we didn't even get a chance to experience that whole history.
Black travelers that visit Denver, there's so many places to visit, especially, I call it the trifecta of the 5 Points neighborhood. Visit the Blair Caldwell African American Research Library. They have a museum up on the 3rd floor, and the Black American West Museum, and Stiles African American Heritage Center, which is across the street from the fire station.
We'll need to go back with Terry. But just like Kansas City, we noticed in Denver that while the Black history is very prevalent, there were not many signs of inclusion.
Considering what we are used to seeing where we live in Seattle, we may have to temper our expectations in this regard, because the signs of inclusion may not be what we are used to. For example, even though we took a point from Kansas City, the city still hosts one of the only professional sporting venues built for women's sports.
Along with those previous considerations came our personal level of comfort. And we can honestly say that during our visit to Denver, we really felt comfortable everywhere we went.
Yes, for the most part, we were met with friendly and welcoming smiles and really enjoyed our time with the locals we met.
So after tallying up those scores, we can officially give the city of Denver, Colorado, an 8 out of 10 for comfortability for Black people.
Wow, not too bad at all. Coming in with some really good scores of 7 for the third stop in our TWB Across America series, we headed north up Interstate 25 into the state of Wyoming to check out the capital city of Cheyenne.
Wyoming, just like Colorado, is another state that is part of what is referred to as the Rocky Mountain States. And while the state is almost similar to Colorado in size, it has far less people. And in fact, it has the lowest population of all the Rocky Mountain states.
Enter in Cheyenne, the most populous city within the least populous Rocky Mountain state. One of the reasons why we chose it as one of our stops as a part of our TWB Across America series, Volume 1. The other reason why we chose to stop in Wyoming at all is because we had never been.
Yep, because that's part of what this road trip is about. Getting out and seeing parts of the country that we wouldn't have otherwise got to see unless we drove. I mean, there's not many flights flying direct into Cheyenne, but who knows what stories we were missing and what hidden gems there were for us to find.
Cheyenne would also be yet another state capital city we would be visiting on this road trip. Interestingly, both of the capitals we visited on this road trip are only 2 of 11 with gold domes. We promise we didn't plan that.
The Wyoming Capitol building is the original building that was actually built before the state was even officially a state. But the building is only one of the many artifacts around Cheyenne that speak to the city's unique and interesting history.
From the booths to mosaics all around town, it's not too hard to tell that Cheyenne is proud of their history. And on our first visit, we found out exactly why the city at least appears so proud.
The story of Cheyenne, Wyoming begins with the story of the American Railroad, specifically a railroad company, the Union Pacific Railroad.
In 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Pacific Railroad Act into law. This would create a transcontinental railroad that would stretch from the eastern United States to California.
Delayed due to the breakout of the Civil War, it wasn't until 1867 that a Union Pacific chief engineer, Grenville Dodge, was sent to survey the area, so to choose as the site of the Union Pacific's Mountain Region headquarters.
Because of its strategic location and geographical advantages, Dodge would choose a town site named after the native tribe that lived in the area, Cheyenne. Thanks to Dodge's decision and Union Pacific's Mountain Region operation, the city of Cheyenne, Wyoming was born.
As expected, Cheyenne would experience a rapid growth and economic boom, one that would benefit the state overall. And Union Pacific Railroad made sure that the politicians at the state legislature would never forget who to contribute the economic success to. They did this by strategically placing the company's railroad depot within direct view of the state capitol.
The history of the city includes much more than the railroad influence. Being that it was an early western frontier town, the history includes some of the outlaws and lawmen that are known throughout Wild West lore.
Today in Cheyenne, that history and those stories can easily be experienced and heard in many ways throughout the city. During our visit, we were excited to dive deep into the city's past and see if we can have fun while doing it.
And of course, for a city and state overall that does not have many Black residents, we wanted to find out what our experience would be as Black travelers visiting for the first time. But right away, having to face a notorious Wyoming foe, just getting there would be very uncomfortable.
Drive grade.
The drive from Denver to Cheyenne is only around an hour and 45 minutes, making it on paper the shortest of all the drives on our TWB Across America road trip. But the short drive time doesn't necessarily automatically equate to a great drive experience.
Nope, because on the drive from Colorado into Wyoming, you have a high chance of running into some of the area's notoriously strong and sustained gusts of wind that, according to scientists who study this stuff, are due to the interaction of mountain ranges and plains. See, as the air flows over the Rocky Mountains, it descends rapidly into Wyoming. My bad.
Yes, the winds are strong. So strong that you'll notice railroad crossing gates at the entrance ramps of the stretch of highway connecting the two states. That's because they will periodically shut down the highway during extremely strong periods. These conditions can be really dangerous for truck drivers.
On the day of our journey, we got to experience that wind and see firsthand the possibility of its power. Even though there was a wind advisory warning, we were able to hit the road before they shut down the highway.
Yes, the wind was a crazy and at times scary experience. I drove part of the way for every leg of the road trip up until this point. But for this trip, I was perfectly fine with letting Anthony handle it the whole way.
Yep, but we kept pushing through. And finally, we pulled into our hotel to take refuge from the non-stop windstorm, right before they would end up shutting down the highway we just got off of.
Initially, because of the wind, our hotel was a much welcome relief, but it would eventually lose its appeal. Because of the wind, it would be the place that, other than a couple of dinner runs, we couldn't leave for 2 days straight.
So, how does a short, crazy windy,
and somewhat scary
drive stack up against our rating scale? Let's start with the views. While we were in awe of the unfamiliarity of the landscape, the views had little to offer.
This area is very beautiful, so we know weather had a lot to do with the lack of views. So we'll still give a point here. Now, in regards to roadside amenities, the stretch of highway leaves a lot to be desired, although we sort of understand.
Yes, you definitely want to fill up before you leave Denver, Not many gas stations after a certain point, but because it is a short drive, there may be just enough options. So we'll give 1 point here. As for the difficulty of the route, the short ride is definitely going to warrant a point, but has to take a hit due to the treacherous wind. And if you happen to be driving an 18-wheeler, then just mark this off as a 0 all around.
As for roadside attractions, they look like a couple of hiking options and outdoor options, but again, the treacherous wind made it impossible to consider stopping, so we aren't giving any points there.
Finally, the category that this drive grade shines, parking. It doesn't matter that this is more than likely a result of having such a low population. Sign me up. The parking here was always free and always premium.
Even with Cheyenne having the most amazing parking situation, which brought Anthony so much joy, the drive grade comes to a 5 out of 10, giving our shortest drive our lowest drive grade score so far on this road trip. But again, considering the wind, this score makes sense.
Yep, the notorious Wyoming wind impacted our drive into Cheyenne. But coming up in level of fun, you're going to see firsthand how we try to experience the city despite it.
Level of fun.
But it was a serious question if we would even get to put the scale to use in Cheyenne due to the wind situation. Even the bison farm we were scheduled to experience on the first day arriving in the city had canceled operations that day due to the wind.
The first day we figured that the wind would subside at least by the next day, and we would be out and about within the town. Boy, were we wrong. The wind advisory continued into the next day. We only left our hotel 2 times, to go get lunch and to go get dinner.
Finally, on day 3, the wind calmed and the advisory was canceled. But most importantly, we were now able to go out and experience the city of Cheyenne. Since the city was built by the Union Pacific Railroad Company, it made most sense to us to first head to the historic Union Pacific Railroad Depot, which is registered as a National Historic Landmark.
The historic site is the original building built in 1886 by the Union Pacific Railroad and is the last remaining Grand Railroad station on the transcontinental route. On the inside, paintings and murals tell the story of Cheyenne and the Transcontinental Railroad.
Beyond the historic building itself, visitors can check out the museum within, the Cheyenne Depot Museum. This museum dives deeper into the same story of Cheyenne and the Transcontinental Railroad that are told by the murals and paintings that decorate the rest of the depot.
On this road trip, I learned a lot about myself, and one surprising new self aspect I discovered is that I must be more of a museum type of girl than I thought, because I really enjoyed the Cheyenne Depot Museum. Trust, I was really surprised about that, but the interactive exhibits and historical artifacts told a truly immersing story.
And when we say immersing, we really mean immersing. Not only can you sit and watch the actual trains that are still running today roll along the tracks, you know we had to do that. Along with that, you can also immerse yourself within the miniature world of railroads, as the museum is home to a famous miniature model railroad.
The world-famous Union Central and Northern Model Railroad. The model is a detailed and accurate representation of scale of the northern gauge Clear Creek, Colorado lines of the Colorado and Southern Railway in the early 20th century. This model railroad has a pretty interesting story in itself. Driven by his passion for trains and modeling, Harry W. Brunk originally built the model in Clarkson, Nebraska.
But eventually, in an effort to better preserve the impressive piece and present it to a wider audience, the 650 square foot model was relocated to the Cheyenne Depot Museum. What is wild is that the model railroad had to be cut into 10 pieces just so it could be transported to Cheyenne.
It actually took a team of volunteers a full year to reconstruct the model within its current location on the 2nd floor of the museum. The year's time to rebuild makes a lot of sense when you see the model firsthand. Each piece looks beautifully and meticulously designed to reflect the real thing.
Yep, that 1 year was nothing compared to the 30 that it took Harry to create the piece of art. And he really did do his thing in his representation of the narrow gauge Clear Creek, Colorado lines, which was a railroad that ran into the Rocky Mountains from 1872 to 1941.
If you're in Cheyenne, this is a stop definitely worth checking out. After the museum, our Cheyenne history fix continued when we hopped on the Cheyenne Street Railroad trolley, a trolley tour of the city.
The 90-minute trolley tour took us around town, driving by and occasionally stopping in front of some of the historic and important buildings and landmarks in the city of Cheyenne. All the while, we were provided some very knowledgeable and entertaining storytelling on the history of Cheyenne and its influence on the state of Wyoming, all dictated by our talented trolley driver.
Yes, we definitely learned a lot about the interesting history of Cheyenne and the state of Wyoming. We did not realize that Wyoming was the first state in the Union to give women the right to vote. That was pretty cool.
After the tour, we felt like we were more than spooled up on the local history. So we wanted to experience another activity that Cheyenne and all of Wyoming is known for, the outdoors.
Just based on its beautiful landscape and its proximity to the Rocky Mountains, Cheyenne is close to a lot of great options for experiencing the outdoors, like the Medicine Bow National Forest.
But for our outdoor experience during our visit, we chose to check out Curt Gowdy State Park, the park that is named after a famous sports broadcaster and Wyoming native. What's also great is that the park is only a 25-minute drive from downtown Cheyenne.
The park is beautiful. In the center, there are 3 crystal clear reservoirs that are apparently stocked with trout and salmon. At the front of the park, there's also a visitor center, and for what we did during our time at the park, well,
while the park is perfect for paddleboarding, boating, and camping, we weren't prepared for none of that. We would have hiked, but we couldn't find any trails close by within the park. And unfortunately, we didn't have time to investigate further because the infamous Wyoming wind started picking back up once again.
While the wind wasn't as bad as it had been in the days before, we considered all that we had done up to this point,
which included extending our stay in Cheyenne an extra day.
It was more than enough for us to feel like we had experienced enough of Cheyenne to at least put it up to our level of fun scale.
So, how did Cheyenne do? Starting with the quality of activities. Hear us out, beautiful people, because we have to keep it real. While we love the activities that we did on our visit, from the museum and trolley to even our brief time within Curt Gowdy State Park, the activities are still somewhat limited.
I know I said that I may be more of a museum type of girl than I thought, but still not enough for them to be my main type of fun. Cheyenne's amazing access to the outdoors is a major reason why it still warrants a point. But those limited options also impact demographic applicability.
Still, to us, we may say that the history may be more attractive to older visitors, and families with young children will love the Depot Museum. And the outdoors is for everyone. Then we can still give at least 1 point for demographic applicability. But the area where we can give all the points to Cheyenne is affordability.
Yes, the prices we experienced in Wyoming were the cheapest we experienced on our whole road trip. That's because Wyoming has the lowest cost of living than all the Rocky Mountain states. Another area that Cheyenne knocks it out of the park is quality restaurants.
Yes, the small city is unassuming in that it could provide some great tasting food. But it's true. From the quality breakfast at the local Epic Egg to the award-winning options at Rail Spur, which is actually a bar, nightclub, and venue space that features storage containers and repurposed railroad materials.
Their cocktails were just as good as the food. Bars and great food is a common combination in Cheyenne because we experienced both at yet another Cheyenne establishment, Westby Edge Brewing. The family-owned and operated company offers delicious food and, I can't believe I'm about to say this, really good beer. Who am I?
Yes, all of these restaurants are worth a try if you do find yourself in Cheyenne. Finally, in regards to special events, Cheyenne does not have any professional sports teams, but every year it does host one of the biggest events in the state, Frontier Days.
The event that's been held annually since 1897 occurs the last full week in July, and the festival features concerts, demonstrations, and of course, one of the largest outdoor rodeos in the country. From what we hear, it's a really great time, but we need to come back and experience it for ourselves, so only half of the points here.
Message! Adding up all of that, Cheyenne, Wyoming comes in at a respectable 7 out of 10 for level of fun. Okay, Cheyenne, the little city that could, came in higher than we probably expected, especially considering how much of our visit was impacted by the wind.
The level of fun was definitely a pleasant surprise, but the big question left for us to answer was, for this being the first city on our TWB Across America road trip, Volume 1, where we didn't find anywhere to dive extensively into the Black history, how would it stack up to our comfort scale?
Comfortability for Black people.
Let's start with the amount of other Black people we saw during our visit. This was actually a bit of a surprise for us because we actually saw a lot more other Black people than we thought we would.
But what really made our visit in this regard was getting to meet up with local Cheyenne Black business owner, Jasmine Jackson, who sat down with us to talk about her event rental space, the Louise, and the Black experience here in Cheyenne.
My space is called the Louise Event Venue, named it after my mom. Yes, I wouldn't be here without my mom, so I named it after my mama. I feel like over time, it definitely changed. Back when I was in high school, junior high, it wasn't really cultural. Being the only Black person in my elementary class or junior high, that was very tough. But as an adult, I think that it has grown tremendously. I did a Black Excellence event last year. I had gathered up all of the Black-owned businesses here in Wyoming, and there was over 30. Just making that list was like crazy because I didn't know it was like that many of us. So just to know that and just to have a visual of that was amazing.
As for what she would say to potential Black travelers considering a visit to Cheyenne,
we are out here. There's not many of us, but there is many of us.
Thanks a lot, Jasmine. While we are giving 2 points for the amount of Black people seen, we cannot give any in regards to current population numbers, being that the recent population of Black or African American non-Hispanics in Cheyenne is less than 3%. But in regard to prevalence of Black history, we came down the middle and are giving 1 point.
Here's the deal about Cheyenne in relation to this aspect. No, we didn't notice an abundance of monuments or plaques explicitly dedicated to Black history around the city, and we definitely didn't find any historically Black districts like we did in Kansas City or Denver. But that did not mean that we did not see any Black history.
The fact is that Black residents have played a pivotal role in not only Cheyenne's, but all of Wyoming's history, influencing the city's political, social, and cultural story. Some even attribute the origins of Frontier Days to a Black cowboy named Sam Bronco Sam Stewart.
We think it's time that Cheyenne builds Sam Bronco Smith Stewart a statue. Considering these stories and experiencing examples like seeing artifacts that spoke to Black people's contributions to the railroad displayed within the Depot Museum, all of this made us consider that perhaps because of Cheyenne's low population overall, it stands as a perfect example of how Black history is American history.
Message!
Visibility of inclusion was another area that Cheyenne made us have to reconsider our approach. We didn't see a lot of what we are used to interpreting as signs of inclusion. But again, that doesn't mean it isn't promoted in some way. The Black history being told a part of the overall history, and of course the mural dedicated to being the first state to grant women the right to vote, can all be seen as some examples of inclusion.
Yep, that's why we give a point to Cheyenne for signs of inclusion. Still, with all that said, let's get to our personal comfort level during our visit. We can say honestly that we felt pretty comfortable personally while we were there in Cheyenne.
Yes, the people we encountered around the town and in the establishments were pretty friendly and welcoming, from our trolley tour guide to employees at Railspur and Westby Edge. And we have to give a personal shout out to the employee at Epic Egg who DM'd us that we left our credit card at the restaurant. He even waited after his shift for us to come back to get it. This is why we are giving the full points for our personal comfort level in Cheyenne. And this brings Cheyenne to a respectable 6 out of 10 for comfortability for Black people rating.
Well, old Cheyenne, Wyoming ended up putting up a respectable case against our scale, coming in with a 5 for the drive, 7 for the fun, and a 6 for the comfort level. Based on these scores, we can say that if you do find yourself going through the Rocky Mountain states, Cheyenne definitely warrants a visit.
Yes, once the windstorm eased up and we were able to get out and experience some of the great things Cheyenne has to offer, we had a blast. Still, we can't give our full recommendation until we come back for Frontier Days.
Message!
Now for us, it was on to the next stop, Billings, Montana. Yet another city we had never been to before, and yet another city with a low Black population. But would it be possible that on this stop, we would find that our luck in being pleasantly surprised by these types of places might have finally run out?
Also, special thanks to everyone who participated in the making of this episode. And of course, be sure to subscribe to our channel and follow us on all of our social media platforms to see our previous adventures.
Until next time, beautiful people, stay up, stay true, and do you. Finally, for the fourth and final stop in our Traveling While Black Across America series Volume 1, we headed north from the Wyoming capital of Cheyenne to Big Sky Country of Montana. So to check out the city of Billings.
Located at the south central part of the state, Billings is the most populous city within, and the biggest reason why we chose it as a city to visit since this is our first trip to Montana.
According to our research, the city boasts its history, its amazing access to the outdoors, and a vibrant craft beer scene, all of which was very similar to the previous Rocky Mountain state cities we had visited on this road trip.
Yes, just like the other Rocky Mountain states, Billings has a deep connection to the railroad industry. But the thing about Billings is that it has its own unique twist on that story, with distinct similarities to each of its Rocky Mountain neighbors we previously visited on this road trip.
Yep, just like Cheyenne, Billings' origins are attributed to the railroad. But it's also similar to Denver in how the railroad played a role in segregating the black population.
Just like the city of Cheyenne, Wyoming, Billings was formed because of a railroad. The railroad that formed it, the Northern Pacific Railroad.
The year was 1882. For context, Cheyenne had been established by the Union Pacific 15 years prior, and a lot had happened since then. See, the Territorial Suffrage Act of 1867 was passed, and it provided more opportunities for African American men living in the West than living in the South. For example, the act gave them the right to vote.
But within that 15 years prior to Billings being founded, the West had developed its own tactics in dealing with their black and immigrant populations. The tactic that Old West Billings deployed seems somewhat like a historical prelude to redlining.
See, the railroad company intentionally divided up the city by running a railroad through it. On the north side, where the depot was located, promoted more civic development. The south side, on the other hand, housed Chinese, Japanese, and black residents, along with the prostitution and vice of the city.
The multicultural south side of the city would offer an abundance of opportunities for the Germans who migrated from Russia and the Hispanic migrants who were attracted to the area to work for the sugar beet factory. But the black population forced to live on the south side of the city still was faced with discrimination despite the promise of the West.
Yes, within Billings, jobs were available, but African American men had difficulty obtaining employment. Schools were integrated, but there were policies in place that created segregation. Even the local newspapers would use the racist phrase "Darktown" when referring to the south side of the city.
Yes, it was bad. But luckily for the black Billings pioneers back then, the first African American to settle in the city was Walker Browning.
Walker Browning was a badass. Born in Missouri, like some other famous people you may know, his father was a former slave that died in the Civil War. At the age of 15, Walker had to care for his two younger siblings after his mother passed away.
Browning was able to relocate his siblings from the South and take them along with his wife and children to the West. Walker joined on a historic survey for America's first national park, Yellowstone. From there, he moved his family again to Deadwood, South Dakota, to give gold mining a shot.
But when Browning moved his family to Billings in 1882 and became the first residents to build on the south side, they would become influential. Eventually, all of the members of the family would use their influence to help their neighbors cope with the oppression and advocate for social mobility.
Yes, Walker and his son Charles both earned leadership roles in the local political party. Charles helped establish a club to organize black male voters and help with local political organizing. Walker's wife Ruth and daughter Claudia also played a role in the community by promoting women's social mobility, higher education, and organizing and helping in developing the city's only black church.
Yep, this was dope black history to come across. And knowing how black cowboys
and cowgirls
have contributed to the history of Old West Montana, we were excited to see how it and Walker Browning's contributions were commemorated within the city of Billings.
And of course, we were very interested in how people like us would find entertainment within the city. Although we will say that thanks to our drive from Cheyenne packing a few surprises along the way, our hopes for the city were high.
Drive grade. The drive from Cheyenne to Billings was around 7 hours. Of course, not including the stops. And yes, we were going to have some stops on this drive.
This was our first time driving through this part of the country. Not having to deal with the windstorm this time around, we were able to appreciate the beauty of the landscape along the way, even with the little bit of rain we did hit.
To us, the Big Sky nickname was very fitting because the way the land is spread out makes the blue sky seem somewhat exaggerated. Another great thing about the drive on this leg of the road trip is that it would once again provide us with some really unique stops.
An interesting mix of amazing, confusing, and just plain weird. And right off the bat, we hit up the weird, pulling off in Douglas, Wyoming to see the world's largest jackalope statue.
A jackalope is a mythical animal described simply as a jackrabbit with antelope horns. And the city of Douglas, Wyoming has declared itself to be the jackalope capital of America. Look, if you're really interested, every year the town plays host to Jackalope Day.
But we will say that during our drive through the town, it felt weird, so be aware.
While our next stop wasn't as weird, it was a bit confusing. That stop was in Sheridan, Wyoming.
In Sheridan, we were attracted by signs that indicated the Black Diamond Trail. We weren't really sure what this was all about at the time, and shoddy service made it nearly impossible to do any research on site, but it just sounded important.
We did see that Sheridan is the 6th largest city in Wyoming, so there's more than likely a lot more to see with the trail. But more importantly for us was that being in Sheridan meant that we were only 20 minutes outside of the Montana state line.
It would be in Montana that we would make our most amazing stop, not only on this leg of the road trip, but possibly the road trip overall, the Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument.
The National Park Service describes this site as, "This area memorializes the U.S. Army 7th Cavalry Crow and Akura Scouts, and the Lakotas, Cheyennes, and Arapaho, and one of the American Indians' last armed efforts to preserve their way of life."
We definitely took our time here. First strolling through the museum within the visitor center, we could not believe some of the unbelievable artifacts that played a part in telling the story of the historical battle that took place where we were standing.
After the museum, we drove through the paved driveway that carved through the park, periodically pulling off at some of the monuments commemorating important moments during the battle. Everywhere we stood, we could feel the strong energy of the souls that fought and lost their lives during the fight.
Yes, this was powerful. Prior to this, I didn't know much about this battle, but after having experienced the Little Bighorn National Monument, I wanted to learn more.
As for me, it was really special to be standing at the monument on top of Last Stand Hill, also known as the name of the battle I most heard growing up, Custer's Last Stand. See, growing up, I would sympathize with the Native side throughout the retelling of this country's westward expansion history. And because the Native side won, not surprisingly, the Battle of Little Bighorn was one of my favorite battles to learn about. Still, on top of the Native Americans winning the battle, this also taught me of what obstacle can be overcome when people put away their differences and come together.
That spirit of coming together continued when it was ultimately decided to commemorate markers honoring the Native Americans who fought at Little Bighorn. Yes, this is definitely a stop that we can recommend anyone experiencing, even if you're not a fan of history.
After our amazing experience at the Little Bighorn site, we had about an hour drive left until our final destination in Billings, and we could say that hour went by pretty quickly.
Our last drive leg on our cross-country road trip seemed like a great experience with the great views and mix of weird, confusing, and amazing stops. But how would it fare against our rating scale?
Let's see. Let's start with the views. As we mentioned, the beauty of the landscape with the big blue sky was breathtaking as we would imagine a drive through big sky country would be. So, all points here.
In regard to roadside amenities, there were a good amount of options for places to pull off and get gas and food along the route between Cheyenne and Billings, so we will give 2 points here.
Our score for the difficulty of the route could be somewhat surprising, being that it took us on 3 different highways. Still, the open road and even more so maybe the 80-mile-per-hour speed limit made the drive seem easy and even free. So, both points here.
What's not surprising is us giving this drive all the points for roadside attractions. The Little Bighorn stop alone is what sets this drive apart.
I was somewhat surprised that we have to dock Billings a point for parking. Around the city, parking spots were actually hard to come by, and I actually had to pay a lot of times. But because it was affordable parking, we'll still give 1 point.
And tallying up the point, even the numbers bear that our drive from Cheyenne to Billings was our favorite of the whole road trip, coming out a 9 out of 10 for our drive grade rating.
Wow, 9 out of 10 is the best drive grade score we've given this whole road trip. This was a great start to Billings. Unfortunately, we were heading into the realization that the drive would be the peak of our Billings experience. Level of fun.
Just looking around Billings, we could tell right away that if we were going to really enjoy this place, we would need to dive deep into the Billings culture.
And beautiful people, we mean deep.
Yes, we hopped into some more local-like attire and hit the streets to experience what Billings had to offer.
Based on our research, in order to experience the best of Billings, we would need to check out the craft brew scene, the outdoors, and the city's history. Since it would be the cleanest activity, we decided to experience the history first.
For our Billings history experience, we went to the Western Heritage Center Museum that's housed in the historic Parmley Billings Memorial Library building in downtown. The museum offers both permanent and traveling interactive exhibits, as well as a collection of over 400 oral histories and 40,000 historic items and photographs, all pertaining to the people, places, and events of the Yellowstone River Valley and the Northern High Plains region.
We were actually pretty impressed by the exhibits in the museum. During our time, we were able to see some really intriguing ones geared toward Native American experiences in the West. One was about a Native photographer, and another was a more emotionally riveting exhibit about the Native conversion schools.
Yes, that one was tough, but still a great museum overall. After the museum, it was time to loosen up, so we decided to jump into the Billings beer scene by hitting the Billings Brew Trail.
The Billings Brew Trail is a self-guided tour along a 1.5 mile loop through the historic downtown region that takes visitors to 9 breweries, 3 distilleries, a cider mill, and even a winery.
We hit a couple places up, but the one that stood out the most was a local distillery, Unnamed. Not only was their product top tier, but the owner also had a Seattle connection.
Yes, the tour, which allowed us to sample local beers, ciders, and spirits, was an okay taste of the local Billings culture. But what we were most excited for was to experience the Billings outdoors.
If Cheyenne's Frontier Days claims the granddaddy of them all rodeos, then we thought Billings could boast having access to the granddaddy of them all national parks, Yellowstone.
Unfortunately, we thought wrong. The fact is that Yellowstone National Park's getaway garden entrance is over 2.5 hours away, and that's with no traffic.
So needless to say that we didn't get to experience Yellowstone this trip, but Billings offered a bunch of other great outdoor options to experience the Montana outdoors, like on the many trails that run along the rim rocks that surround the city.
For our experience, we headed just outside the city to Zimmerman Park to check out the views and get in the hike. The park offers a loop trail that runs a little over 3 miles.
The trail offers a variety of routes, but regardless of which one you take, you will not be shorted the breathtaking views. Our hike was definitely a calming and much needed experience at the end of our road trip.
The views, the nature, yes, it's easy to say that this by far was our favorite experience during our time in Billings. Having checked off activities in all of the major categories of Billings notoriety, we were ready to put it against our fun scale.
So Billings, how'd you do? Let's start with the quality of activities. While we loved the exhibits in the museum, the experience was more emotionally weighing than actually fun. The Brew Trail was okay, but to be honest, we forgot to scan the QR code at a couple of the places and can't really remember what we were supposed to get a part of that deal.
If we were to consider a different activity than what we ended up choosing in Billings, then our best bet would be gambling at a casino. You see, casinos are all around Billings, everywhere you look. Not really our priority of fun, but hey, who are we kidding? You know we're from the Show Me State, so we were gonna hit at least a slot or two.
Yes, even though we couldn't deny our gambling DNA, we have to knock Billings for 1 point for the category. Lack of options and abundance of casinos also hurts the city in terms of demographic applicability, so no points there.
But Billings does bounce back by getting all the points for affordability. Yes, the Billings prices weren't as cheap as Cheyenne, but still really affordable. And best of all, the state of Montana does not have sales tax. We really love that.
As for quality of restaurants, while we did have a really great restaurant experience at a couple of spots, including one of the better steakhouses in the city, finding other options were far and few between, so we'll deduct a point there.
Yes, the food overall in the city was a bit of a drop-off from Cheyenne. Finally, for special events, Billings is another city without a professional sports team. Although during our visit, the local Metro Park First Interstate Arena was hosting a professional bull riding event. Since we had the attire, we thought about dropping in to really experience the Billings locals in their natural environment.
But y'all, after 2 weeks on the road, dropping into unfamiliar places, and some of which we did not see another Black person for miles in between, we were just too emotionally worn out to go in.
Some of you already know that sometimes it does get heavy traveling while Black.
So all in all, the museum was awesome, the nature was breathtaking, and we met a cool local distiller with a Seattle connection on the brew tour. When put up to our scrutiny of our level of fun scale, Billings, Montana comes out to a 4 out of 10.
Ouch, not too great, but we can't lie. There was just something in the air in Billings that we just couldn't shake. And it wasn't until we analyzed our time there through our comfort level scale did we realize what it could be. Comfortability for Black people. So
let's start with the amount of other Black people we saw during our visit and the Black population numbers. See, in Billings, we saw a few more other Black people than we saw in Cheyenne. What's interesting is that Billings has a lower Black population percentage.
And when we say low, we mean low. Less than 1% as a matter of fact. But that seems to be the case for the state overall. And that's why we are giving 2 points for Black people seen but still 0 for Black population numbers.
As for prevalence of Black history, we have to say that Billings drops the ball here as well. The Black history of the city isn't really visible at all.
This is a shame because the state of Montana has a rich history of Black contributors to its story. We really wondered what the other cities around the state do to reflect that part of their history. So, no points for Billings here. Now, what about visibility of inclusion?
We did notice that the Native history was incorporated within the city's history, especially in the museum we visited. So, Billings will give a point for signs of inclusion. But finally, how does all this contribute to our overall feeling during our visit?
This too was interesting for us during our time in Billings. What we noticed was that our radar was up a lot more walking into places within this city than it was in Cheyenne. Still, we didn't have any overtly bad encounters.
Yes, the vibe around the city did feel a lot more cold, and look, we know what that means, being that we live in a city that carries a cold moniker. However, we did meet some local residents on the trail within the park that were actually talkative.
Yep, one of the locals gave us recommendations of local attractions, and the other gave us insight. See, both were extremely nice, but the second local made the point for us not to broadcast how great Billings was, so not to attract more people to move in there.
At first, we were somewhat taken aback, but then we thought about it. Perhaps, possibly, their response spoke to the actual source of the perceived coldness within the city. More specifically, that's possible that the coldness doesn't come from a place of racism, but more so of seclusion.
You see, Montana is a huge state, and perhaps most people that come out here to get away from people. All people. Possibly. Anyway, at least the nature was beautiful. And as we say,
nature loves Black people.
So we'll give 1 point for our personal comfort level.
After tallying up all the scores, the math comes out to a grade that accurately reflects our feelings about our experience overall. We give Billings a 4 out of 10 for our comfortability for Black people rating.
Well, Billings, not great, but definitely opportunity to improve. As for us, you can't win them all. But more importantly, this was it for our first TWB Across America series.
So we turned in our rental car and headed to the Billings airport to catch our 2-hour flight back home to Seattle, Washington. The flight was nice for us both to just finally sit back and just enjoy the ride the whole way.
Yeah, we were happy to be home, but once we were home, we definitely missed the open road. See, on this road trip, we learned a lot. Yep, a lot about this country, and even a lot about ourselves.
We cannot wait until our next road trip, and if you've been planning, or if you've never thought about it, we definitely recommend you taking the time and planning yourself a road trip.
Even if it's not that far, just hop in the car and hit the road. There's so much out there to see, and you better believe that we will absolutely be back out there to see more.
And we thank you for coming along with us on this journey from Wentzville, Missouri to Billings, Montana. Be sure to follow us to make sure you don't miss our next adventure.
Until next time, beautiful people, stay up, stay true, and do you.
Be sure to subscribe to our channel and follow us on all of our social media platforms to see our previous adventures.
Until next time, beautiful people, stay up, stay true, and do you. Special thanks to the sponsors of this episode, Real Solutions RS and Sync Seattle. Check the description below or our website for information on both.
Also, special thanks to everyone who participated in the making of this episode. And of course, be sure to subscribe to our channel and follow us on all of our social media platforms to see our previous adventures.
Until next time, beautiful people, stay up, stay true, and do you.